Beyond the pages of Shuzo Oshimi's Trail of Blood lies a message that complements the very philosophical essence of the philosopher Emil Cioran. The manga, Trail of Blood, is about the relationship between a mother and son, their isolated life, and the son growing up under the shadow of his mother. The panels get darker and darker as you delve deeper into the shocking revelations of the story, forcing you to confront a question that maybe you wouldn't have ever put into words yourself. Is it better to never have been? Man, an animal with retarded desires, is a lucid nothingness encircling everything and encircled by nothing, who surveys all objects and possesses none. Now, I couldn't have asked for a better pairing between Emil Cioran's The Trouble with Being Born and The Short History of Decay. Both books I read one after the other. And manga, Trail of Blood. It's so surprising, it's so shocking to me that somehow I found so many things in the manga that directly hint at aspects of Cioran's writing that coincidence just seemed so unbelievable. Cioran's philosophy helped me understand the manga a lot more, and I was able to sort of feel my way through a lot of the more horrifying and disturbing panels. Emil Cioran's philosophy has been read and may perhaps be interpreted, especially by like a beginner who is not used to his philosophy, as being negative in a lot of ways. So pessimistic, nihilistic, cynical, misanthropic, just some of the words that come to mind that can be taken in a negative light. But I have read most of Cioran's works, which includes The Trouble with Being Born, A Short History of Decay, The Temptation to Exist, The Fall into Time, and I'm forgetting one. Yes, On the Heights of Despair. That was my first ever Cioran read. So, do I feel the same way about his philosophy? No, not at all. He's one of the very few philosophers that I have read who wrote about reality, human existence, life, living, being, becoming, even unbecoming, as a matter of fact, in a completely unfiltered manner. So yes, it makes you uncomfortable. Most of the times you don't understand what he's saying, but that's not even the point. So from this philosophical point of view, which can be nihilistic, which is pessimistic in different, like there are very different moods to Cioran. There are serious aspects of he has his aspects that, have that dark existential sense of humor, and just the sentences that you want to take from the book. So from this philosophical point of view, and especially from the emotional perspective of Trail of Blood, you are left with no choice but to think more deeply about the meanings you derive of and from life, as well as the absence of meaning. One example in the manga is that there are many dream sequences that without a fault add to the unsettling atmosphere of the story. You see a character, a child, experiencing unimaginable proportions of horror and emotional trauma, and this kind of hurt seeps into his dreams. Then you have the perspective of Cioran, who explains the existential purpose, so to speak, of dreams. After each night, we are emptier. Our mysteries and our griefs have leaked away into our dreams. Overwork by dreams, waking is another kind of weariness that awaits the character in the manga, and one that he has to come to grips with every dawn. Seeing that take place in the manga itself is very daunting. This contrast between dreams and the waking life and how they sort of bleed into each other is one of the themes of the manga. And it's one of the things that make the manga feel so powerfully and deeply human and delicate. The way that Cioran has penned down his philosophical musings is, I think, breaks all the rules of philosophical writing or philosophical thought and dialogue, and they really close the gap that you didn't know existed between ignorance and self-awareness. And again, it shouldn't have to sound very revelatory or profound. It can be as profound as you want it to be. Cioran's aphoristic style of writing really helps with this process because they're not long essays. It's very short, 3 to 4 sentences. Another thing that really stood out in Cioran's Trouble with Being Born was how he talks about the unasked for responsibilities that merely existence imposes upon humanity. The problem of responsibility would have a meaning only if we had been consulted before our birth and had consented to be precisely who we are. So it just wakes you up, like he calls this the dogmatic sleep of living, where you read something and it's definitely something that you haven't thought of or you haven't seen or heard, and then you read it and somehow it just sinks in the themes that his philosophy aims at, how you can break them down and think about them and relate them to your life. I may sound like I'm rambling here, but personally to me, that is a therapeutic process. According to Cioran, all successes and failures of life, all the questions and answers amount to the same thing. Whether one succeeds or not comes down to the same thing. He essentially argued that in itself, the act of becoming alive, as in to be born, is the most serious and intolerable scandal of all. He imagined a time when we have already lived a life before being born, the numberless moments when I am not, the non-born. And he's very honest too. I love his honesty, to be honest. The Trouble with Being Born, where he's talking about sort of like the failures of Stoicism. Like he has mentioned Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, he has also mentioned Socrates. He gives a reason as to why he thinks that Socrates never wrote. We must beware of whatever insights we have into ourselves. Our self-knowledge annoys and paralyzes our demon. This is where we should look for the reason Socrates wrote nothing. So anyway, coming back to when he speaks about the failure of Stoicism, the Stoics' maxim, according to which we should submit uncomplainingly to things which do not depend on ourselves, takes into account only external misfortunes which escape our will. But how to accommodate ourselves to those which come from ourselves? If we are the source of our ills, whom are we to confront? Ourselves? We manage, luckily, to forget that we are the guilty parties. And moreover, existence is tolerable only if we daily renew this lie, this act of oblivion. Very interesting point that I was able to take from both the manga, Trail of Blood, and Cioran's philosophy is just the philosophical idea that our identity is not solely a product of conscious decisions, because we are not completely wholly conscious of the decisions that we make most of the times. And this is something that you see in the manga. The character doesn't always choose what he chooses to do. In Jean-Paul Sartre's Existentialism is a Humanism, for example, the philosophical idea of existence precedes essence is very thought-provoking, and it's something that one of the things that got me reading existential philosophy. And it's also something that comes up from other philosophers like Simone de Beauvoir, Albert Camus, Martin Heidegger, Soren Kierkegaard. That we create our own meanings and identity through the decisions that we make. But in the manga, in Trail of Blood, however, you're told a very different story, which sort of reflects the philosophical point of view of Cioran. The circumstances that the character has to live through, the traumatic events of his life, especially during his formative years, irreversibly cripple his identity and even his sense of self. And as painfully as this is portrayed in Trail of Blood, he is forced to face the horrors of becoming his own person. When you know quite absolutely that everything is unreal, you then cannot see why you should take the trouble to prove it. Where are my sensations? They have melted into me. And what is this me, this self, but the sum of these evaporated sensations? It's so interesting because the phrase "they have melted into me" is something that is expressed in the manga. So this is at the time, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's just at a time when the character just starts to disassociate in a way. So everything around him, all the faces, all the people who are talking to him, asking him questions, they sort of, the panels, in those panels, the faces sort of start to melt, start to fade, start to disappear until they are erased completely. So to see that in a manga and then to read these words in this book, it just fit. it just fit perfectly. Again, not a spoiler in any way, but when I realized that the manga right from the very beginning was never about the violence but about what caused it, this realization immediately sort of drew me towards one of the most terrifying films that I have seen recently, which is Perfect Blue, Satoshi Kon. Both the manga, Trail of Blood, and the film Perfect Blue evoke a very unsettling and terrifying atmosphere. Now, I didn't notice this right away, but both stories play around with the dreams and reality themes and how they deeply affect a character, causing all kinds of paranoia and anxiety. And I can't help but sort of imagine that the manga Trail of Blood, had it been adapted into an anime films or a series, would have had sort of the same kind of horrific, chilling music, visuals and cuts that the film has. Cioran's philosophy, when taken as a philosophical perspective, it can be very rewarding. It can be horrifying at times, but also very hopeful, though with a sense of dark, existential sense of humor. And about the manga, well, nothing comical about it. In fact, there are scenes where the characters do laugh out loud and smile, but that's anything but funny. No one has been so convinced as I of the futility of everything, and no one has taken so tragically so many futile things. Every phenomena is a corrupt version of another, larger phenomena. Time, a disease of eternity; history, a disease of time; life, again, a disease of matter. And here's something that serves as an antidote to everything that I have spoken about in this video. This is a quote I recently came across. Since we cannot change reality, let us change the eyes which see reality. Now, I hope you liked these recommendations, even as serious or even as unsettling as you might think them to be. But honestly, this stuff like this truly moves me. I love reading philosophy. I love reading manga that sort of rattles my cage, that makes me think, that I think about for days and weeks after I finish it. Same applies to books. So it's just one way of mine to sort of cling to life a little less. So anyway, this is Aisha from Readadayclub, and thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, if you like my recommendations, do like the video and subscribe to Decay Club. I'll see you guys very soon.